Hey everyone, FinTech here. So Solana is one of the most innovative new cryptos out there and has long been branded as the next Ethereum. But with the coin's market cap down substantially amid a larger crypto sell-off and with the price remaining basically flat over the past 2 months, it begs the question, how can we make money off this coin in the short term while keeping our tokens safe in case the price does take off in the future? So in this video, I'll go over Solana's benefits over a blockchain like Ethereum, talk about the tokenomics of the token, and get into a strategy where you can make double the normal Solana returns by holding exactly 83 Solana tokens. So hit the like button if you want, and let's start with an overview of what Solana actually is. So Solana is a much smaller rival to Ethereum, letting users do everything from mint NFTs or participate in DeFi or decentralized finance. Solana's most important feature is that it's fast, like really fast. In fact, when FTX, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, looked to create a decentralized exchange where people could trade crypto derivatives or swap assets across blockchains, they ultimately decided to use Solana over Ethereum as the base chain for the application, which given Ethereum's insane scale is truly a David versus Goliath moment, or maybe a Kanye West versus Taylor Swift. And to understand how Solana fits into the larger picture of cryptocurrencies, let's go through the story of cryptos up to this point. It all started back in 2009 when Satoshi Nakamoto minted block 0 on the Bitcoin blockchain, kickstarting what would become the crypto revolution. Bitcoin had certain nice features like decentralized trust, so strangers could trade Bitcoin without any fear of getting ripped off, and it didn't require any central authority to keep it running, hence decentralized. Ethereum was the next step. Conceived in 2013 by programmer Vitalik Buterin and finally built in 2015 by a whole team of developers, Ethereum added a bunch of new useful features. In addition to the Ether token you could transact with, it also had the ability to create smart contracts, paving the way for next generation blockchain tools like decentralized apps or dApps and non-fungible tokens or NFTs, which are now so easy to create that even someone like me could do it. But Ethereum since its launch has been relatively slow and extremely costly to the environment, using up huge amounts of electricity with its proof of work model. And while they for years have had plans to improve Ethereum, it's been almost a decade and they still haven't fixed all the problems. Then one man decided to take the reins and launch his own crypto network to solve Ethereum's limitations. Anatoly Yakovenko wrote a white paper in 2017 laying out his idea for proof of history, a new way to build a blockchain, and he called the resulting blockchain Solana. But wait, proof of work, proof of history, we're throwing around some terms that not everyone is going to know, so let's back up a second. We need to distinguish here between proof of history and a consensus mechanism like proof of stake or proof of work. Proof of work is kind of the old school way of obtaining consensus on a blockchain network, and it's what both Bitcoin and Ethereum use today. With proof of work, you mine blocks on the chain by solving computationally intense math problems that take a lot of computation from your computer. The idea here is that by requiring this work, it prevents any one crypto miner from becoming too powerful and influential to where they could validate 2 blocks back to back, which would allow them to essentially fake transactions. The problem is, all this work requires tons of electricity and expensive GPUs to do the processing, which has resulted in global GPU shortages and rocketing energy usage. Just Bitcoin alone has an energy footprint larger than some countries. The solution to this is proof of stake, a different consensus mechanism that allows people to stake their ownership in the blockchain to validate transactions instead. Ethereum estimated this would save 99.95% of their chain's electricity usage if implemented. That's almost as much energy as your dad saved by turning off the lights whenever you left the room. The issue here is you need to have a lot of different validators willing to stake their crypto and correctly validate transactions to protect the network. Now, networks like Ethereum are currently in the early stages of starting to use proof of stake, but Solana has been running using this mechanism successfully for quite a while, making it much more environmentally friendly than other large chains. So that then leads us from Solana's consensus mechanisms of proof of stake to a technique they use to speed up the network called proof of history. And this is really the core of Solana's advantage over other cryptos. So one of the issues with larger blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum is that they are slow, like really slow. With Bitcoin, it takes 10 minutes to process a single transaction, and the whole chain can only handle around 5 transactions per second. Ethereum does a little better at 30 transactions per second, and they plan to increase that to as much as 100,000 TPS, but Solana can theoretically handle up to 710,000 transactions per second. Though for now, they are running at slower speeds since they don't have enough users to require the full scale. And the secret to how Solana accomplishes this is core to Solana's benefits over Ethereum Ethereum. You see, with pretty much every other blockchain out there, the primary goal is to get all transactions agreed upon and added to the ledger in the correct order. If things ever got out of order, no one would know who owns what tokens and the whole chain would collapse. They keep track of everything by having each node on the network update every other node around the world every single time a new transaction comes through. So one node can't fake a transaction because everyone in the world knows what transactions have already taken place. The problem here is it can take a long time to send a transaction across the entire planet and wait for everybody else to approve it. And if blockchains ever go interplanetary, things will only get worse. Guess you'll have to wait a couple hours for your bored Martians NFT purchase to go through. But proof of history eliminates this back and forth by tagging each transaction on the chain with a timestamp to show when the transaction occurred, letting you determine their order after they are received, rather than making you wait until the last transaction has already cleared. We can think of other chains kind of like bumper-to-bumper traffic. You start driving when the car in front of you moves, but you can't go through until that traffic clears. Proof of history is more like a racetrack where every car can see the stoplight at the same time and all hit the gas at the same time. Now, yeah, they might cross the finish line in a different order than when they started, but we can always look back at their timestamps from when they were sent and reorganize them into the correct order after they arrive. This proof of history model removes any kind of bottlenecks communicating with other chains, and a look-back process can quickly clean up any out-of-order transactions. And this functionality is part of the reason why FTX, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, decided to build their DeFi derivatives trading platform on Solana. But there are some other benefits Solana provides that we need to look at, because they are key to understanding it as a crypto. Solana's higher transaction speeds also means there is less competition for each transaction, resulting in much lower gas fees on the network versus something like Ethereum. And considering it cost me something like $70 to create my own NFT on Ethereum, lower gas fees are a really big deal for driving increased user adoption of the network, which also ties in with another advantage of Solana, which is that Solana has one of the fastest growing developer communities of any crypto project. This means there is a lot more focus on creating useful applications for Solana, which could ultimately be the deciding factor in Solana taking a substantial share of the crypto user base in the future. And lastly, Solana has not technically left the beta stage yet for their mainnet, which launched back in February 2020. Now, the only item left on Solana's roadmap is their full release of the mainnet from its current beta stage. And considering how much the blockchain has achieved while still in the beta stage, it's hard to imagine it won't do much more once it has reached a stable state. But in the meantime, there are some drawbacks to Solana's current beta stage that are very apparent when we look a little below the surface on the network. And I know some hardcore fans probably don't want me to bring these up, but I think we need to look at both sides of these projects. In December 2020, a bug took the Solana network down for 6 hours, something you hope would not happen with a decentralized system. And in September, the entire network went offline again due to high traffic. And that's not to mention Solana's decentralization problem. You might think all blockchains are decentralized automatically. After all, that's the whole promise of blockchain. But Solana's proof of stake mechanism requires validators to stake Solana tokens in order to validate transactions. Since there are fees and work associated with being a validator, only very wealthy individuals or early Solana developers who've held for a long time are really doing this. And the rest tend to be large pools of Solana held by exchanges like FTX or Kraken. In fact, if we go to Solana Beach, which is a really useful website for looking at Solana stats and information, we can see that the top 20 validators control 34% of Solana's total staked tokens, which theoretically means that just those 20 validators, if they all got together, could decide to completely halt the Solana network, which sounds pretty spooky. Now, this is probably not a huge issue in the short term, since companies like Kraken or FTX aren't all going to collude. They're all competitors after all, but it's still not an ideal situation. So to understand why we're seeing this concentration in validators on the network and learn how this all ties back to the value of Solana and the amount of money you can make staking them, we need to look into the world of Solana tokenomics. Tokenomics is just the economics of the Solana token. So right now, their market cap of tokens in circulation is around $28 billion. If we also include all the new Solana tokens that are currently staked, that jumps up to $46 billion. But new Solana are also being created every year. When you stake Solana right now, you will be paid out a little over 6.7% annualized if you act as your own validator, which means Solana experiences around 5% inflation per year right now. Now, that inflation rate will continue to drop until it eventually levels out around 1.5% inflation in the long term. So at the validator rate, great, you still make money. But in order to earn that 6.7% per year, you have to pay around 3 Solana every epoch, which is every 2 to 3 days. Which means in order for you to actually make money as a validator, you need to stake a larger number of Solana tokens at once, generally upwards of 30 to 40,000. And I don't know about you, but I'm not making that kind of money on YouTube. Please subscribe. So most people instead stake their Solana with an existing validator, who will usually take a small percentage of the staking rewards as a fee and pay you out the rest. But if I just go into Solana Beach and look for a validator to stake with, who am I going to choose? I can scroll down this whole list of validators, but ultimately most people will pick the larger validators that are less likely to do something dumb like go offline or scam you completely. Hence why we are seeing a massive concentration of Solana with the biggest stakers. Now, the super minority that could take down the network right now is just 20 validators out of a pool of over 1,600. But what if there was a way to earn more than the 6.7% APY paid out by Solana while simultaneously not keeping all your tokens with one of the already over-concentrated big validators? Well, there is a way. Obviously, that's why I set up the question. In a previous video, I talked about how the best staking return you can get with your Solana is by putting your tokens into what's known as a locked staking contract on Binance. You can put up to 20 Solana tokens into Binance and get paid out a crazy 43% annualized return for a 15-day lockup, which is great. It's higher than you'll get anywhere else. There's just 2 drawbacks to this. Number 1, your actual Solana tokens aren't being staked in the technical sense. Instead, Binance is loaning out your tokens to someone else. So you don't have true possession of your Solana. You kind of just have to trust Binance. And number 2 is that if you live in the US, like most of my audience, you can't use Binance's main platform. Instead, you have to use Binance.us, which, as it happens, does not even have the option to participate in locked staking. Luckily, there's another technique we can use to generate double the average APY being paid out staking directly with Solana. And that's by using what I call the liquid staking loophole. Now, people have been doing this for a while, and I was inspired to look into this by a Medium post by Ben Quartermain. Normally, when you stake Solana, you put your tokens with a validator and you get paid the interest on your coins. But there is a cooldown period whenever you stake or unstake your tokens, because you have to wait until the start of the next epoch to participate, which could take anywhere from 1 to 3 days. Not a problem if you just set it and forget it, but if you need liquidity, that could be an issue. Of course, there's also the issue of picking a validator when it's already become more centralized than the network really should be. The solution to this is something known as liquid staking pools. These pools take your Solana tokens and spread them among a whole pool of validators, and they also remove the warm-up and cooldown periods. Lido, for example, is a pool with $16 billion in assets and over 87,000 stakers across a few different blockchain protocols. But the first and largest Solana-specific liquidity pool is Marinade, which allows you to stake your Solana with them and receive the current staking rate for Solana back. So if you stake with Marinade, you'll get around 6.7% per year. But Marinade will also give you an equivalent amount of MSOL, which is a utility token that you can trade back for Solana at any time. In fact, right now, MSOL is slightly more valuable than Solana itself. Now, that may sound too good to be true. You give them your Solana and they give you free tokens in return, plus interest from staking, but that's really the beauty of liquidity pools. But once you have your Solana staked with Marinade and you've gotten your MSOL tokens in return, this is where the magic really happens. You can now take your MSOL and stake that with an exchange like FTX, or lend it out for DeFi applications. We won't get into the details of DeFi right here, but let's just say you decided to hold your MSOL with FTX, for example. They will pay you 8% on your MSOL up to $10,000 held with them. Now, if your MSOL value goes above 10,000, your rate's gonna drop down to 5% with FTX, but that's still pretty good considering it stacks on top of the 6.7% you're already making from staking with Marinade. But if we just focus on the highest possible return, we could make 14.7% per year on up to $10,000 worth of Solana using this technique. 6.7% from Marinade and 8% from FTX. And if we look back at Solana's price in 2022, the highest we've seen it go is around $120 per coin. So if we assume some volatility in Solana's price, at $120 per token, we could stake 83 tokens for a 14.7% return without needing any appreciation in the price of the coin whatsoever. At the same time, there is a potential downside I need to quickly mention, and that's something known as impermanent loss. Normally, you want your liquidity token, MSOL, to stay in lockstep with your base token, Solana. So if one moves, the other moves. But in some cases, if one of the tokens takes off for the moon while the other doesn't, it's possible for traders to start using the price difference to quickly trade back and forth for quick arbitrage profits, which means that when you eventually unwind your tokens, you may get back a different amount than you originally staked. So you probably won't lose value per se, you'll have the same amount in dollar terms as before, but you may miss out on some of the upside if this were to happen. It's just an important note for anyone who might be using this method. Now, this video wasn't sponsored by anyone, I just wanted to share this cool technique with you. So if you found it helpful, just let me know with a comment, and if you feel like it, maybe like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.